Okay, so you go through the jail experiences. You're saying people are not prepared for coming out on the outside. Now,
Right.
you've written this book. It's a lovely, interesting, non-textbook. It's really approachable. It's a great punchy style, short paragraphs. I love it. It's very, very easy to understand. When you're reading that on the way through, what are the core things that someone needs to do who's either just come out of jail or indeed is just rethinking their life and is going to try and escape from that poverty trap?
This is simple. So it's a roadmap. Like right now, if anybody wants to travel, let's say I'm in New Orleans and I say I wanted to go to New York. If I put in my Google phone, give me the GPS from New Orleans to New York, it's going to give me different options, whether I want to walk, fly, drive, ride a bike. And it's also going to give me the destination, and it's also going to give me a time. When we're thinking about improving ourselves out of this incarcerated state into a state of wealth, it's the same process of GPSing your success, whether you want to walk it through, drive it through, fly it through, and how much time do you really have to invest into yourself? And then one, you actually have to get started. And so the book gives you a strategy map on how to move from one place to the other place. And you just follow those step by step. It's a basic read around literacy. So it was written between the 7th and 8th grade level reading. So it's not really difficult to read or understand the concept, but it's really to push you to get started. Actually, the hardest part of it all with any economic development or investing, as you should know, so much hesitation in just doing it and taking the risk. And so jumping out and stepping out on faith and believing in yourself is going to be critical. But once you do, here's the map on how to move out of your condition and up to a better way.
It's interesting. You've broken the things down very simply. You're giving the message of core thing. What sort of feedback have you had to the book so far?
Oh, so what took so long? So, I mean, when you really think we have over 77 million people in America who have a conviction, when we think about the poverty, when we think about the crime, especially crime. So crime is in poverty-stricken neighborhoods. The reason why there's so much poverty is because you don't have access to funding. If there's no access to funding, there's no access to ownership. And so the difference between an area that has high poverty and low poverty is the majority of the residents, do they own that space? And so when people don't own that space, it's devalued and it's not taken care of. It's not yours. And so you see a lot of garbage, you see a lot of spray paint. It's not valued in the same sense as if you own it. And so when you have all these folks returning again from incarceration and they don't have access to own, you got to keep in mind the circle of influence and the family and friends who they live with. They're back in poverty. They don't own anything. They have kids who then grow up in that poverty. They don't own anything. So you're building on just this deficit of depression. Mm-hmm. It has to come some time where we figure out, okay, this is not working. We have to do something different. During the pandemic, I don't know about where you are, but the government passed out stimulus payments. If economics wasn't important, well, why would you try to pass out money to get people going? So during tough times, you recognize that people need finances and resources to restart their lives, but you're putting a ban on people who have made a mistake in their lives and not giving them access to resources. So it's an oxymoron in a sense. You're releasing someone with a brick tied behind their leg. In the same way during slavery, and I don't know if you knew this or not, but during slavery, the government paid restitutions to slave owners for losing their property. So they figured that I can invest into the slave owner for losing their property to help them recover. But the slaves who were released, they received nothing. And so in that example, you see there are some people who are receiving money and are succeeding and some people don't. For us to build ourselves as one unit in one country, we have to make sure that everybody have access to those resources. It's a tragedy to see what's going on in Ukraine. Mm-hmm. But the main thing is that those people of that country are going to need access to resources. Hugs and kisses is not going to get it. They need places where they can rebuild themselves and their lives. And so in the same vein, let's remove the racial element. Let's just look at it from an economic point between the people that are wealthy and the people that are not wealthy. And the main thing is who has access to the resources. And so all I'm arguing for is that people who are returning from a conviction should have access to banking and investments just like everybody else.
I think that's a very well made point. And actually, you look at the whole history of slavery and you talk about the economics of that. And actually, that's a point that's been true in slavery going back all the way to ancient Rome and before. And it didn't matter what was the origins of the slaves, there's always been this perverted system where the slave owner could manage to be compensated, where the slaves were just left in a dreadful situation. And you're absolutely, I think, spot on with some very, very interesting points about access to capital, which is what is vitally important, and something which a lot of people, and I think, to be fair, a lot of the people who would normally watch this show just somewhat take for granted.